Hi there, I'm Linda Mechner, back again with Why Eating Healthy is Not Enough. I'm here today with Dr. Brad Gorski. Brad, I know you have an amazing story, and I would love for you to share that with our listeners.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, Linda. I think this is a great topic too. I feel like that, we've, compared to 30 or 40 years ago, I think it's a lot harder today to get well. And so I think, this topic becomes so important. And I guess kind of where my journey kind of starts with, I was always someone who was into health. I always took care of myself. I was a college athlete. And really kind of overnight, I really started losing my health, unknowing to, my wife and I, we moved in a moldy home. And, really, I started, really coming back with some unusual symptoms. I was a physician at this time. I was, taking care of people, really doing what I was passionate about. And it was like overnight, it's like, I was having all these issues, brain fog. I was having a lot of like inflammation issue, gut issues. And kind of, we would just get more strict with nutrition, right? We would just make sure we eat zero sugar. And we didn't really eat sugar anyways, but it was like, we kind of would just get really strict with our lifestyle. And I was better for a couple of weeks and then I was sick again. And really, unfortunately, this culminated with, us realizing it was time to move out of this house, that like there had to be something in here making me sick. My wife and I made the decision to move. And that weekend I had flown out to Michigan in one of my best friend's wedding. And at the age of 27, I woke up the night after giving my best man speech. And I had a massive stroke, 4 different blood clots at areas of my brain. I was rushed to one of the best stroke hospitals in the country. And after being there for a week, they basically looked at me and said, "Hey, we can't explain this. We have no idea why this happened. Good luck." And that was what I was given as a diagnosis at the age of 27. And so for me, that there's always a cause, there's always a reason, and I believe that. And so that one kind of put me on my own health journey. It was not only up to me to find the answers and figure out why this happened, but I also want to make sure how to resolve this so it never happen again. So yeah, it kind of put me on my own health journey. It took me definitely, some time of, struggling through learning the right things to get myself well, going to physicians and really, experimenting with how to get myself well. And, over the course of a year, getting my numbers improved, reversing my condition, I really, moved on to be able to helping people with autoimmune issues. And that's kind of where my passion, my story lies. It was something that wasn't something that came to me as far as like I thought I wanted to do this. I really got sick and got myself well and knew there were other people suffering and I wanted to help with that.
What an amazing story. I mean, I think a lot of times people get exposed to things and they have no idea, whether it's chemicals or mold or some kind of, occult, subclinical infection that's just pulling them down. And the fact that you had this mold exposure and went from great health to poor health overnight is, I mean, what a devastating story. But how did you then circle back and say, okay, it's the mold and this, this is the cascade of events that happened in
Yeah.
health that led me here, so that then you could say, okay, this is how we reverse it.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think where it started with, I was very health conscious. So, right away I noticed there were small symptoms going on, so we would do testing, figure out like, kind of what was going on in my body. We tested our house for mold and this was years ago. So the testing today is a lot better than it was then. So, a lot of things that we kind of suspected, I kind of thought there was mold, but really too, we weren't getting definitive testing. We know I was having gut issues and, we know different things were off. Like, we would look at labs, organic acid tests and, stool testing. So we knew there were deficiencies there, but the problem was, it was kind of like, well, are these really the reason why I'm sick? Or are these really the cause? Or are these really just a symptom of my body not being well? And so that's when really, what I always tell people, we talk about a toxin like mold, it wasn't like that was, the only trigger. That was just the final thing that pushed my body over the edge. So, I think we kind of have to look at a cumulative effect. When I was a young kid, at a young age, I was vaccinated and I quit breathing. I lived on breathing machines for multiple years of my life as a little kid. So, I was obviously sensitive to mercury. So, at that point I still had one amalgam filling in my mouth. So that's a small stress, right? A small toxin. But so those were things I think that were present. And so, I just was in a position where in the home I was living in and obviously with stress levels, I wasn't in an environment that was going to get me well or even really reverse my condition. So I think that was the tipping point and where really, we knew something was going on. I was even, seeing some natural physicians at the time. So it wasn't like we were in the dark. It was really just putting our finger on, what it was. And I think the other thing that really kind of brought me to a conclusion on is that, I was doing some protocols for mold, and I knew that mold was a problem. I'd help people get out of moldy homes. I just never realized that living in the home would make me that sick. So that was the other thing, is that I wasn't going to get well living there. I had to physically remove myself from the environment. And obviously, once we'd kind of made that decision, it was, things always happen for a reason. So I was always thankful for it, because, really too, it's led me to be able to help a lot of other people because of what I suffered and went through.
Yeah. So the mold was really the straw that broke the camel's back. It wasn't
There we
necessarily
go.
like the root of all of it. It was, sort of the, what you'd suffered as a kid, and the side effects of that debilitated you to the point that the mold was like just the last straw.
There you go. And I think, we forget that, we go back, and a lot of times people believe that like their health condition, their health problem, whether it be a thyroid condition or an autoimmune problem, that it's like, it kind of like triggers like, well, I did this and it caused it. It's like, well, yes, that's part of the problem, but we have to also look back at the stressors. If you had, if you have 12 metal fillings in your mouth that have been there for years, well, maybe that's just bioaccumulating. It's like leading up. And then now the home you're living in is just the trigger that pushes you over the edge. And so, don't get me wrong, there are, genetic factors to these things that we have to look at with people today. And, but, I think that's a great thing. We're learning so much there's, one of the things I always encourage people on is, if we look at autoimmune disease, for example, right, it's one of the fastest growing disease categories. We look at it gets, 1/10 the funding that cancer gets, but it may actually affect 2 to 3 times more people. And so, we live in this environment today where, disease is becoming, it's changing is what I tell people. But really today we have better tools. We're getting better ways to analyze this stuff. And so there are answers, there are hope. So I think it's also the important thing that people understand.
Yeah. What I would love is for you to maybe explain the mechanisms of autoimmune disease for our listeners that are not clear on on what exactly that is, just to help
Yeah.
lay a common understanding of autoimmune conditions.
Yeah. Hey, well, let's start here with this, like, inflammation, which people know what inflammation is. We don't realize though that inflammation is really partly immune mediated. So really, anything in our body, whether it's, we're getting attacked from a virus or an infection, or again, even just our body healing from inflammation, the immune system is what's coordinating the healing. And so, an autoimmune condition is really what happens is our body begins to self attack itself instead of foreign objects. Now, there's a lot of research of why that's happening. And there's some of what we call in food sensitivities, what they call molecular mimicry, and these things that maybe our immune system is getting confused. And I think the reality of what really happens is that, it's in a position where our body is kind of, injured. It's not responding. It's not healing. And it begins to attack itself tissues. And not just foreign particles. And so that's the process of autoimmune issues. And that's why, from autoimmune problems, it can attack your gut, it could attack your skin, it could affect your thyroid, it could attack your eyes. So it can really go anywhere. And it really shows no borders, unfortunately.
So what are some of the most common autoimmune conditions that you see, or that, are in our, prevalent today?
Yeah. I would say number one, I think, and also two, is really thyroid conditions. What most people don't realize about thyroid conditions too is that, thyroid conditions, everyone assumes is just a thyroid problem. But, we know the research today is that 80% of all thyroid issues are really immune problems. I mean, they're autoimmune. So, so many people miss that. And also too, with thyroid problems, people usually know them as an autoimmune problem. But one of the things I think that people don't understand is I would actually anticipate that really autoimmune issues with the thyroid are probably one of the most misdiagnosed and also maybe the most underdiagnosed condition. So, there's some research that shows that, maybe, only half of people actually are diagnosed, but they have a thyroid issue. So that means that people are suffering, with, low energy and brain fog, and they can't lose weight, and they eat well and take care of themselves. And really, they're looking at an immune or a thyroid issue. So, that's a big one. Type 1 diabetes, people know is an autoimmune issue, but, you have, things like your Crohn's, that's another one, your lupus, MS, those are all autoimmune conditions. And really the important thing to really understand is no matter where the attack is happening, it's really an autoimmune problem. And I think that's the thing that we're really today in the medical community, there's really not good treatments. Everything's kind of focused on steroids and inflammation control, and it's never addressing the underlying immune, reaction, which we also know a lot of that's happening in the gut, which is obviously, where there's a ton of research being done and some great tools today to help people.
Right. And so what are some of the most effective approaches to reversing autoimmune conditions that you use that are easy for people to do?
Yeah. Yeah, one of the first things I always tell people is, we know obviously if autoimmune issues, a majority of our immune system stems from our gut. So, I always tell people, we want to look at, are there dysfunctions in the gut, whether that be a leaky gut and maybe there are certain proteins people are reacting to. That's always something to consider. I think, we're learning a lot more about our today, not about just the bad things that are in there, but we also have the good guys in there to keep the bad guys away. So I think about, what does our gut look like? What are the bacteria in there? What are the good guys look like? What are the bad guys? Is there candida? Things like that we all know are going to be there, but how do we create balance in that system? So, identifying the gut, I think another huge thing today is also toxicities. We have to know if we have specific toxicities. And another thing a lot of times people don't really think about is also what are we deficient in? So I feel like, we have to take kind of a multiple step approach to this, but it's like, hey, we got to clean the things that are in excess or we're toxic. We got to remove those so we can heal. We got to fix our deficiencies to give our body the right nutrients to heal. And then obviously if, there's an underlying immune imbalance and gut problem going on, we have to kind of, minimize that and resolve that to give our body a chance to heal. And that's important, because these things don't turn off overnight. We have to give our body that time and energy to be able to heal.
Yeah, I think you're just so right on with that approach. I mean, detoxify, renutrify, rebalance the gut. And, I didn't mention this earlier, but your story is so similar to mine in terms of the mold and the amalgams.
Mm-hmm.
When I was vaccinated as a child, I don't have any memory of being sick, but my mom tells me that it just completely changed my personality, like overnight. And then I lived in a house where I just happened to have the bedroom that was right over the damp, musty basement.
Yeah.
And then I also, had all these amalgam fillings. I think I had 16 of them in my mouth for many years. And it wasn't until I got rid of those, I did a series of detoxes, that I was really able to start to turn around my health. And, it's just, there's like this fulcrum point, and thank goodness I don't have any autoimmune issues, but, I had other issues that made me very, very tuned into my body and my health. And I've been, this has been my life path is
Yeah,
reading
for sure.
and protecting my health. But so what happens when people do all of the right things? They do a detox, they're eating nutritious food, they're taking their probiotics, and they're still not getting results. Where do you go from there?
Yeah, I think here's the good news is, we talk about autoimmune issues and there's some problems with autoimmune issues. We don't really have a great testing to say, hey, let's run this one blood test, and this one blood test tells us what's going on. So autoimmune testing, unfortunately, is a little more complex. But I think with the good news and what we're kind of finding out today is that I think for a majority of people, I would say probably 80% of people, doing the right basics or putting the right fundamentals in, most people I work with, 50 to 80% of them just put the basics in and they're way better. So I think, we start getting into like advanced detoxification, advanced nutrition, advanced mold removal. I would say that's probably the minority of people, so I think it's important for people to listen to this saying, oh my God, like, do I get my fillings removed? Do I do a mold detox? Oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed. No, I think the reality is we put the basics in first, right? Put the fundamentals in, right? Fix the deficiencies. What I'm saying? Like work on the leaky gut. Like let's make sure there's not certain things your immune system is really reacting to. We start there, and I think most people are a lot better. Now, if we want to jump to that next level, I think, yeah, that's where I think we have to start really considering these things. And one thing I've really got kind of passionate about too is, I think today one of the confusions around nutrition, and I love nutrition, don't get me wrong. I think if you look behind me, I probably have about, 20 nutrition books. And I tell you what, if I pull out every one of them, I'm probably going to like every single one of them. But I feel like today where we're kind of realizing is that, in healthcare, the more we're understanding about these type of tools is that the reality has to be customized, because I'm not the same as you, nor are we like maybe the other, 1,000 people that are listening. And so I really feel like that we have to start taking more of a custom approach to healthcare. And I think that's where I always tell people a lot of times when I work with people nutritionally we try to figure out, what are the things that are unique to them? How do we do that? Well, we look at, bacterial levels of their gut, what are things maybe they can digest, they can't. We also look at like genetic tendencies. There are some things we know through your genes, like which type of foods are you going to do better on? What types of plans? Not everyone needs a keto plan. Not everyone needs a plant-based plan. There are great, I think, what I would call like, rules that exist in all those that we all should adopt. But sometimes, looking through the minutia to figure out what's right for you is really where I think that's where the cutting edge of healthcare is going.
Amen to that. So let's say somebody, does all of that. And, like you said, most people will get better just by doing the basics. What period of time would you say, like, let's say people make the changes and they follow that plan, do they wait 6 months? Do they wait a year before they say, okay, I've taken this as far as it can go. Now what?
Yeah.
Like, what's an appropriate amount of time?
Yeah. I feel like it takes a little bit of learning, because I know a lot of people I work with, I think some of the hardest part is like getting consistent with some of those habits. So when you first make these habit changes, like, so if we're talking about maybe making some fundamental changes, right, whether that be like different foods, different nutrients, different supplements, right, and maybe we're to get really serious about keeping, and I think, something that maybe a lot of people don't talk about as much, right, is stress and sleep. I mean, these are crucial, so, I think when we certainly start trying to dial those in, and I think when those are, I would say, 50 to 80% dialed in, I think most people I see within 3 to 6 months, there should be kind of substantial change where people start realizing, man, this is working. I'm on the right track, or I'm not. And that's just something I've seen. I don't have any hard or fast rule for that. People are different. But, I really kind of feel like when you start putting those right things in, and I do think this is important to bring up, I went through this process with myself. I did a lot of things to try to get myself better. There were some numbers I had in my blood work that showed I had this autoimmune issue that was really forming clots. I had like 16 different numbers. And I've said this before in other, podcasts and summits I've been on, and I don't remember if it's 14 or 16. I sometimes mix that number up, but it was a lot. And, within 3 months, most of my numbers were gone. So I'd made drastic changes, but also too, I had a couple of numbers in my blood work that took 2 years to move. So it wasn't that not a lot changed in those 2 years. I'd done, some similar things, but I feel like also too, like it takes time to heal. And I think that's important for people to be patient with, because, our sickness may take years to develop no matter when you feel it. So I think for me, one of the things I also learned through that process too, that healing is a journey. And although I'd done a lot of the right things, there were some things I could not push my body faster to heal, than it just took time. So I think time is one of those things I think it also is required that people need. I think we have to be patient with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So right. So right.
Yeah. And I'm always patient. I'll be the first to admit. I was like, I want results tomorrow. I'm like, I want all these I want all these blood numbers perfect. And I guess, maybe that was God's way of just, like learning a little bit of that patience. But I think that's important for people to wrap their head around, because, I have people I work with who, they heal in a couple months, and I have other people take a lot longer. And I think that's where we also have to realize too, though, that, the health is a journey. And I think the other beautiful thing about it is it's not something that we're designed to do for 6 months and abandon. It's designed to be a change in our life and the way we think and the way we really take care of our family. And I think once that happens, that's really where we set up we're really developing just like, I guess, a plant or a crop. We're developing healthy soil. We're feeding it the right things and beginning to get a great harvest. But it does take time. And there also are seasons to life. So we have to be patient through those.
Right. Right. All right. I have another question for you.
Yeah.
And this is, the question that nobody really wants to hear the answer to it, but I'm really curious to hear your answer. And that is, in the context of autoimmune, how do you feel about gluten?
Yeah. I think one of the things we always have to go back with gluten is, I think too, we do know that gluten itself, and we look at the molecule, right? It's changed. So unfortunately today, like if we talk about gluten, we have to also just kind of separate, okay, are we talking about the wheat that exists today? Or are we talking about the wheat that exists thousands of years ago? So, there is some of that. I think also too, today we talk about things like wheat. We have to realize that, we can demonize wheat. And I'm going to tell you, most people listening to this probably don't need to be on a lot of wheat, but also too, we also have glyphosate and chemicals on this wheat. So I feel like, that's where we have to start understanding that, yeah, we have to be real cautious that, maybe we can't make wheat out to be the bad guy it is, but we also have changed it as humans. It's also very toxic. So for some people, yeah, there's some people I work with who are able to, maybe have some gluten in their diet. They can still do well. unfortunately for some of my sicker people I work with, unfortunately for them to get well, sometimes people have to remove it. So, I think it's one of those things that also man's kind of screwed it up. We've changed wheat from what it was originally designed to do. So it has some different properties. And that's why it has more gluten. Around the 1970s, we actually gave a Nobel Prize to a gentleman, I think Dr. Borgwell, for what he did and how he hybridized wheat. So it has more gluten, contains more lectins, more phthalates. And these are all things that really, can become detrimental to our body.
Yeah. Wheat is just one of those crazy things that, like, wheat, the staff of life, right? I mean, it's been this staple in
Yeah.
human diet for thousands of years, but now it's this highly problematic food that's, suspect in the best circumstances. But one thing that really shocked me when I first became a health coach, I had several clients who lived in the US, but they were European.
Oh,
And
here we go. Yeah.
they were so sick here in the US, and then they would eat, and they would get off of gluten because they couldn't handle the gluten, but then they would go back to Europe to visit family or whatever, and they
Yeah.
would have toast and jam for breakfast every morning and feel great. Have no
There we go.
problems at all.
Yeah. Well, and that's where I think too, I think where we're starting to understand that. And I do think too, don't get me wrong. I think this goes back to this. There's some genetic susceptibility to this, right? We have to look at the toxins of any food. And also I think the other thing, when we talk about wheat too, is that we look at the way it's prepared. A lot of times, they're fermenting their wheat or they're using more sourdough. So I think also the way we prepare foods changes, I think, their nutrition value. We forget that, right? So I think, we look at something like sourdough that's fermented, like people are doing a lot better on that than an American whole wheat, at the grocery store. In fact, if you're in America, I may even possibly suggest I'd rather have you probably do the Wonder Bread than the whole wheat sitting there, just because at least you're not getting the wheat germ. So, I think that's where I think, we have to kind of expand our understanding. And that's where I think, when you work with someone, a health coach or a physician that can kind of help kind of customize that for you, you make lateral changes. So, if you're eating wheat every day, let's start maybe doing it 3 times a week and let's change the quality you're eating. And I think those are the places we can all agree on and start with before we all agree that no one in the world needs gluten,
Very good point. Lots of good points. So I know you have a wonderful free gift for our listeners. Do you want to share a bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah. I love when I name this, my ebook, and we say that food is not medicine when you're autoimmune. And people always kind of look at me and they're always saying like, wait, hey, and you're always talking about nutrition. And what my point is that, when you're autoimmune, it's only the right food is medicine. And so I think that's important, because I think today it's not just any food is your medicine. It's only the right food. So, my ebook kind of goes through the 4 things that, if you're autoimmune, maybe why your food is not your medicine. And that's why we have to kind of get more specific about these things too. Just an interesting topic, kind of we were talking about with your client or patient of yours talking about how they were in Europe. I see that a lot today. When I work with some of my clients, who people will say, well, hey, like I have a candida issue and I can't break down oxalates, or they're sensitive to certain foods. And next thing you know, it's not really a candida issue. It's just they lack the bacteria to break that food down. So that's where I think we're expanding our understanding of these foods. And a lot of times the testing today is helping us with that for sure. So.
Fantastic. Well, Dr. Brad, thank you so much for being with us here today and sharing your knowledge and your wisdom and your insight and your experience. I appreciate it so much. I hope our listeners have gotten as much out of it as I have. And I just want to thank you again. And
Yeah.
we'll see y'all later.
Thanks so much.
All right. Bye.